Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jamar. Today's episode 181. We're going to be interviewing Brenda. How you doing, Brenda?
I'm great, Jim. How are you? Thanks for
Uh,
having me.
I'm doing well, and yeah, I'm excited to have you on. I just noticed it. It's a pretty necklace. The blue stands out.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Jewelry is like a story in itself. It all has a story, you know?
Okay. There you go. So let's get started. As we were talking about beforehand, my first question is, tell me about your childhood and growing up.
Um, my childhood growing up, it's a little spotty. I think that from what I've done in my own recovery and research, that's pretty common for childhood trauma. I can remember my parents going through a nasty divorce. I can remember
How old were
um
you during the divorce?
I was 5, and it was about that time where my father was had started an affair with someone that lived in our apartment complex. He had a habit of always making me his accomplice. I'm an only child of my parents, although my father has several other children before and since. So my mother was an alcoholic. I
Do you talk to your father's other children, your brothers and sisters?
mm, not when I was older a little bit, but not. It was you'll see. My
Okay.
family's a little weird. So my mom would leave a lot at the time. You know, I was little. I didn't know. I don't know what I thought. I thought she was an alcoholic because that's what I was told. Because I went to a lot of meetings with her. And to be quite honest, I was very afraid of her. She was very violent when she drank, and the sorry, the so the divorce went through. You know, it was the 80s. Things, when I think about it now, I'm actually kind of shocked at the way it went. You know, I was told to stand up in front of the judge and say, you know, I don't want to live with my mother because she was an alcoholic. Like, who at 5 even knows what that is technically? I mean, I guess I did from the meetings and the, you know, what I saw growing up. But so I did that, and I got to live with my father for about a year.
Did
And
you want to live
then,
with your father?
I'm sorry,
Did you want to live with your father or did
I
you feel
did want to live
pressure?
with my father. I was
Okay.
a spoiled daddy's little girl. But you know, in hindsight, he basically used me to hurt my mother. I couldn't understand mental illness or addiction or any of that at the time when I was young. So to me, she was just this scary person who, when she drank, was very violent. And so we were living together, and I thought things were going quite well, but something happened where my father had to claim bankruptcy. And then the next thing you know, like, I'm being dropped off to live with this woman who I've been told is terrible. It was
Well,
rough. It was 3 schools
what was it?
in
A family? Was it when they said you dropped? You said they dropped you off with who? Like a
my
family
dad
friend?
left me with my mother. He said he had to claim bankruptcy and could no longer keep me, and I had to go live with my mother.
Okay.
So in that year, I lived with my mother. We lived with my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, and then my parents decided to get back together. This was when I was in 3rd grade, and by the time I was in 4th grade, she had taken her own life. And then, not allowed to see my maternal grandparents for years. So I was like 18, and then I could, it was a lot of old school Italian toxicity, blaming, things that just people did that may not have been so healthy. But I mean, I was just a kid. So you're kind of at the mercy of your adults. Um, so I lived with my dad. And by the time I was 13, I was definitely not, I was like going out with my best friend's older brother who was 18. I had drank a few times, smoked a little pot, nothing major, but my dad's grip around my throat was like, you're not allowed to leave the house. You're not allowed to talk on the phone. He started driving me to and from school when he found out I had a boyfriend. Now this is I'm 13. I hadn't, that I'm aware of, received any help for what had happened growing up, and then, having to stay living in that apartment where it was the last time I saw my mother. I had a lot of hate and a lot of anger. When people would say, "Oh, I'm sorry that your mom died," I'd just say, "Well, that's okay. I hated her." And I kept that till I was like 35. So
Was it
I
something you
ran away
just
from
said, or did
what
you think
that
that's just something you?
that's that's what I used to respond and say as a kid. That's okay. I hated her. That was my child way, like, again, as I said before, there was no like therapy, there was no talk of childhood trauma. It was just, I don't know, just carry on. And so by 13, when all of that started with my dad and the tightening around, it just got too much. And I ran away from home with my best friend's older brother, who was 18. At that point, once I got caught, my dad didn't want me back again. So I went to live with a family friend who knew both of my parents from where we all lived when I was born, which was in Chelsea Ridge. It was in Dutchess County. But so she took me in. She was very strict. I had my first boyfriend. We drank, as I grew up upstate New York. We went to parties on the weekends. We had drinks. I did have an older boyfriend again.
How
He
much
I
older?
did he graduated high school when he was a senior when I was a freshman. Now I did have other little boyfriends in between, but I spent almost my entire high school with. Like, I didn't break up with him until before I became a senior. So he was a little abusive, and he would drive all the way to pick me up for school, to make sure I wasn't wearing this or that. I don't
How,
blame him as an adult. I don't blame him for, we all we all carry on the toxic traits that we are gifted at birth. Unfortunately, I don't have blame for any of that. He's also like the first person that ever like gave me cocaine and LSD, and it wasn't something that became like something I did. It was just random. He definitely
how was
drank a
he
lot.
abusive? You said he was abusive. What
Well,
did
he
he
would
do?
just not. There were some violent instances physically, and then just, I mean, driving to pick your girlfriend up for high school just so that you can monitor what she is wearing is not really, that's abusive, to tell her she can't wear a skirt. I remember a really violent fight over a pair of stretchy leggings, that I bought like on my break at work or something. And I don't know. So by the time I was a senior in high school, I didn't want to deal with it anymore. And I started seeing someone in my own grade who also could be a little handsy. It seemed that the abusiveness was always there in the background. Always. It was always there. And I didn't think, you have to realize it's like 1992, the year I graduate high school. People don't talk about these things. Your friends know about it, but nobody really made a, it's not like it is now. Okay. Let's
You
just put
didn't
it
know
like
about
this.
what the abuse?
Yeah, they do. You tell your friends like, "Oh gosh, we had a huge fight because I wore leggings," but no, I don't think anyone realizes how serious it is. Like, that's how it starts. You know what I mean? Like, that's the beginning of, this person may not be best for me, or that maybe there's something wrong with this person, because you don't monitor what people wear and things like that. You don't get violent and hit people. And we both had, you have to realize, I had seen a lot of this toxicity growing up. Like, I love my maternal grandparents to death. Well, they're passed now, but um I feel like I learned a lot of, just these behaviors that took me years to even break my own self, because I didn't realize that I was doing them, because that's normal. It was normal to throw out like these little digs and like just these things that are really not okay. But each person, like I have said, we all do the best we can with what we have, just like our parents do. It's not a blame game. It's no one's fault. I just kind of got swept up in, I already had codependent tendencies, and they were just always there, whether it's from the upbringing that I saw or whatever the case may be. Not feeling, my dad had a lot of women, a lot of girlfriends. There was a lot of that, and he worked also. He was a single dad, and he wasn't really available, I guess. And so this is how the storm begins. By the time I graduated high school, I had started experimenting a lot. I had broken away a bit from like some of my more, I would say, stable friends, like the ones that we didn't just get like fucked up all the time, and moved on to the group of friends who was just, drinking every day after school. And then graduating high school was a very large year of, acid. And I could remember pinpointing that, doing acid that summer really changed me. I don't ever remember being depressed before that, but I can mark it in my brain because I remember it. I remember it happening that way. And it stopped as quickly as it started. A friend, the boyfriend that I had my senior year, who I did break up with at the end of that, who passed away from an accidental overdose in 1999, he had said to me about the acid. He said, well, you're going to do it and you're going to like it. And then you're going to not like it. And it's just kind of going to go like that. And then you're going to say you're never going to do it again. And it's just going to kind of go like that. And then it really will happen that way, that you'll never do it again. And he was right, because he'd already been through it. And that's sort of how it went. And then I spent the next couple of years, working full time. I mean, there wasn't like college money for me. I did receive $10,000 from the death of my mother when I turned 18. But it took until I only learned 2 years ago that my mother died on suicide watch at the hospital. I was told she died of pneumonia. I didn't realize she was actually on suicide watch when she hung herself at the hospital and hit her head and ended up in a coma. So that was very painful to learn a couple of years ago. Luckily, very far into my recovery, but it just still felt so wrong, that, people could hit a deer and get more money for their car. It wasn't really about the money. So I had to placate myself with that. Hopefully, this doesn't happen today, you know? So I
Going
was
back real
working.
quick, let's take a step back. So I think you said you were 15 when you started getting into drugs and alcohol. What were the main things? What were you using mostly?
It was mostly like just keg parties after school,
So
on the
drinking.
weekends, drinking a little bit of pot, although not much. Cause I remember after getting caught and having to move to the new school, I was pretty against that. I actually I broke up with someone for the fact that they smoked pot, which always makes that person laugh to this day, because the older person that I decided to date instead was just well known for, the fact that they did drugs. And, I was still young and, again, very codependent at the time. And I don't know, for a long time romanticized love, or who I thought I could save and fix. And I don't harbor those delusions anymore. But yeah, so it started with just, just drinking. This is what upstate kids do, on the weekends we have keg parties, and then the cops come and we run from them. And, you tell your parents you're at one place. So at this point, my dad had moved to live with me, but he became the exact opposite of who he was before. So I'd be like, oh, I'm going to be at Missy's for the weekend. And he'd be like, okay. And meanwhile, I'd be like in Jersey with my boyfriend's family or something. You know what I mean? Like, I was always not where I was supposed to be. But I did work full time. I got a job at the mall as soon as I could, and I always worked all the way through for as long as I could remember. Um, so graduated high school, stuck around town a little bit, and then my best friend and I decided we wanted to move to Colorado, which was great. Except for that's when the rave scene was getting pretty heavy, and crystal meth is pretty popular out there. um, So that happened. And there was this, couple months of, working 7 days a week, raving at night. The crystal meth didn't really make you feel like wasted. It just made you feel like you could work 7 days a week and keep going and going and going and going. Um, Unfortunately, my one roommate was driving the other roommate to work and totaled my car. So we all had to come home. And at that point, I took a step back from anyone that I was connected to from my hometown, spent a few months in my dad's house crying my eyes out, and which I assume now are the after effects of doing crystal meth for a few months in a row. And I reached out to a friend who was in my circle of friends, but never drank and did drugs. My dad had gotten married for the first time after all of these years, and her children were living in the house. It was a very small apartment. My dad was not kind to those children, and I couldn't be there. I just couldn't. It was an awful feeling, and I that friend, my friend Michelle's family, was nice enough to take me into their house so that I didn't have to, be a part of that. It was really hard to see. And then I felt bad because I wasn't treated like that. I mean,
And
you have to realize
your dad didn't care you were living somewhere else?
no, I only went back because of the car crashing thing. And I was 20 at this point.
Okay.
So he had gotten remarried, and two of her youngest kids were living in the apartment with them. And his treatment towards them, in my opinion, was unacceptable. It used to make me cry, and I felt bad, and I moved with a friend and her family. We had our plan to move to New Paltz. She was going to be going to college there. Another friend of mine was as well, and I had a job at the diner there. So we all rented a house, and sometimes I laugh because I'll be like, I left like my hometown. Like I wanted to get away from the people at home that were doing all of these drugs, and I moved to New Paltz of all places. But it was a good experience. And
What is that known to be a drug scene?
New Paltz, New York. Oh yeah,
The,
yeah,
oh, it's
yeah.
in New York?
It's New Paltz. It's New Paltz. It's New Paltz, New York. Doesn't everyone know it? No, I'm just
No,
kidding.
I've never heard of it. And I'm from New Jersey. That's why I was saying New
Yeah,
York.
it's like 90 miles north of Manhattan. It's a college
Okay.
town. It's a college town. I mean, what college town isn't a drug town, right?
This is true.
So I don't know. Things were I would say that I was definitely in my early stages of alcoholism, but didn't really realize it. I was a young girl, 21 years old, going out, having fun. It started out like 1 or 2 nights a week, and then I remember there was just a reason to be out every night. Mondays was like free this, and Wednesdays was like 70s night. And, it just kind of escalated up. And then I was single for most of this time because after I just needed to be single. I had spent most of my life in a relationship with somebody, usually treating me like less than or not so nice. So this is when my first date rape happened. It was not a violent rape. So for years, I guess you tell yourself it's okay, that you deserve it. You shouldn't have gone home with this person. It's the first time I ever went home with someone and I said no, and they were not listening to me. And I remember this decision in my head, and I guarantee you my ex roommate remembers it too, because I remember thinking like, well, this is going to happen anyway. He's not stopping. I've said no. I might as well not even be talking here. And it was like a choice, like you just go with it, because if you don't go with it, it's happening anyway. So that
Had he
happened.
threatened you? Had he threatened
Nope,
you?
nope, no.
So,
And I would say that, this is just the thing that happens. Unfortunately, too much. I don't think just because somebody goes home with someone afterwards, that means that gives the other person a right to do whatever it is they want. And plus, no means no. But that's just not how it was in the 90s. It just wasn't that way. So now guilt and shame is like starting to build up. And then I meet this guy who tells me that he's in recovery from heroin. Now you have to realize I'm still totally like a codependent at this point. I still believe with all of my heart I can save these men if I just love them to death. Well, that wasn't true. He wasn't actually really in recovery at all, and he was very abusive, and he told me that if I sold my car and quit my job and we moved to his grandmother's house in Florida, that he would stay sober. And I said, okay, okay. And within a week, he was, dragging me by my hair back to New York to get his drugs. And I got another job at a diner, and his parents helped us get a place. And then every day I would come home and he would take the money to get high. And after a couple months, or it may not have even been a couple months, I was like, hey, I want to try that. And I had gotten high. I had been shot up one time. Before this, I got very violently ill. Honestly, I can't even believe I ever did it again. It was a terrible experience. But in any case, a couple years later now, I think I'm about 22, 23 at this time. I'm like, well, I want to try that. So it happened very quickly that I remember doing it for like, it was either 3 or 5 nights in a row and then waking up and not feeling so well. And then I had an opportunity where someone told me I could stay with them in Florida. So I picked up, I went to detox for 3 days or 5 days. My best friend bought me a one-way ticket to Delray Beach, Florida, and that was it. I didn't use heroin again for a long time. I mean, a couple times randomly throughout, but I became like a full-blown addict when I was 30 once again.
When did you go from the drinking to the heroin?
The drinking
What was your
never, the
what was your
drinking kind of,
progression?
the drinking kind of slowed down when I was in the relationship because like obviously now I'm not going out every night.
And
And I
what
wasn't
age is that?
drinking. I was
Like
working. What?
what age around what age are we talking right now?
22,
Okay,
23.
very
The
young. Okay.
relationships always seem to keep me out of the bar because like why would I, you know what I mean? I mean, ultimately, I guess I was looking for to be loved, and that wasn't going to be at a bar. I had already learned that by the age of 22. Um, so I moved to Florida and I didn't do heroin for a long, long time. I was working. It was 2 years because I would come home to New York for the summertime. And when I was 23, my friend came to visit me from Vegas, and we went out to this bar that I used to go to every night because it was like the only night. Now I'm living in Florida. Okay. So I'm not doing heroin anymore, but I'm working in a restaurant and everybody drinks after work. This is South Florida. Okay. This is how it is. So my friend came to visit for New Year's, and we went out to this bar that it was the only 5 a.m. Most of the bars close at 2, but like each area has like one bar that's open till like 6. So we used to go to this bar called the Ugly Mug. And it's like the same bartenders all the time. You go to the same place every day. You just know them. You're not like sleeping with them. I guess they're kind of your friends, but not really. You know what I mean? They're your bartenders. It is what it is. I don't remember anything except for my friend that was with me said that we disappeared, myself and this bartender, and apparently he had sex with me. I don't have any recollection of it whatsoever to this day, not even a little snippet of a thrust. And shortly after that, I found out I was pregnant, and I had only been sleeping with one person prior, but we always used protection, and that was it. I was like, I'm pregnant, and I moved back to New York on my own to stay with my maternal grandparents.
And how old are you at this point?
23.
So
So
it's about a year.
my daughter was, yeah, born when I was 24.
You've been through a
So,
lot by such a young age.
and I'm 48 now. So how much worse do you think it gets?
And
It doesn't get better, my friend. It
you
does,
you
right?
had quit heroin, but you quit heroin while you were pregnant?
I was already off the heroin for a couple years. The
Okay.
heroin stopped immediately. I never did heroin in Florida. I left here from detox, went to Florida, and the heroin never started. The drinking started. I met someone and we moved in together right away. And we both worked really freaking hard. We had a lot of fun. Work week in Florida is 6 days a week. So on our one day off a week, we would go to the Keys, or we drank a lot, like a lot. And that's what we did. I don't know. We had a lot of fun. I mean, I know that's not the proper way to have fun, but when you're 22 and 23 years old, that's just how it was, and you felt like if you were working hard, why not? I was always had to pay my own bills and things like that. And that was, work is something that I've always had a good work ethic. And I felt like if I was paying my bills, why not? Like, and I always like to enjoy my life.
That's a
Let's just put
very
it like
common
that.
thing. I did the
Mhm.
same thing where I said, I make money. I'm one of the best salesmen where I work, etc. Obviously, I don't have a problem. So for some reason,
It's
we tie our jobs into so much as if we're sober or not.
Oh yeah, I know a lot of people, especially with the alcohol, that struggle because I work hard, especially some of these like real manual labor type friends I have.
Yeah,
I mean, they're working their asses off. You're supporting your whole family. You're doing all of the things right. Why can't I have that drink? Well, because once you start getting DWIs and things like that, then it becomes a problem.
yeah.
you know, it's such a fine line too, because if you look at like the criteria of like basing like people on like mild, moderate, severe, alcoholism, drug, whatever the drugs are, it's all different. It would be really hard to diagnose someone who works every single day, has no problems physically or legally or socially as an actual alcoholic, believe it or not.
I know
But
some people can get by with it, but I mean, obviously, they're killing themselves inside, and
yes,
most of them
definitely.
are putting on a front. Most of them aren't that happy. They just might
Yes,
seem that happy.
it's true. Life is hard. No, they never said it was going to be easy, but I don't think anybody ever made it. They could have
Yeah,
given us a little clue though, like a
yeah.
little bit harder, just a little. No, so I came back and I was pregnant. There was no doubt in my mind that I was going to have this baby. I had one abortion at 18, and I found it to be extremely traumatizing, and it just was how it was.
So
Um,
this child was a product of the rape that you went through.
I will not ever know that because there was never a paternity test done ever. Um, unless she decides to speak to me again one day and we can get that 23andMe thing done, but it didn't matter to me. She was mine.
Yeah,
And
no,
that was it.
obviously, of course.
But my grandparents' house was extremely dilapidated. It was not really fit for a child. I was working full time at a restaurant, and my dad and his lovely wife swooped in and said, "Oh, we'll take her for a little while and, get on your feet." Well, that turned into a fight of me having to literally get my daughter back. During this time, I rekindle things with my high school senior year boyfriend. He wants to get married. This is when I come home pregnant. He wants to marry me. He doesn't care whose baby it is, all of that. And we had always remained really, really very close. It's one of my best friends. But he wanted to move down south, and I had the job, and my dad and his wife had my daughter. They said, "Oh, just go down for a couple of months, and then we'll give her back to you." It was like supposed to be December or January or something. Well, Rob went first. And during that time, I met my ex-husband, who I would later have another child with, and he would raise my children actually their whole lives. But Rob actually died of an accidental overdose during this time, and it was the first. You would think that the death of my mother would be the first hardest thing for me, but this was hard. It was hard for like 30 years. Now it's not as hard. It just, I remember at the time feeling really strongly that it had to be for something, you know?
Yeah.
I felt like I had to change everything. I can't ever drink again. I'm never going to do drugs again. I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to be this perfect mom because it has to be for something. And I did okay at it for a little bit. I married David. I got my daughter back. We got pregnant with my oldest son pretty shortly after. So by the time now I'm 25 and married, and I have two kids, and my oldest son was he cried a lot, and I had a really hard time. I went back to work. I worked in restaurants like my whole life. Went back to work when he was 4 weeks old just to get out of the house. And I started telling my husband that I wasn't happy. You know, can we work on this? And, you know, whatever the case. I mean, it's not his fault. Um, it is what it is. I went back to work 4 weeks in, and I started drinking again, not coming home. I mean, I would come home like right before he had to to go to work, to his like actual real job as like a math actuary. Um, I tried the best I could. I remember feeling like I felt like somebody like plopped me in this position. It was like, go. Except for I had like absolutely no, and I'm not using it as an excuse. I remember it vividly, and now I understand it. Now that I've been in recovery for so long, that I really didn't know what I was doing because no one had ever. I had never been a part of like a two-person family or really a family. Like I just didn't. I was an only child. There was just so many things that I was not tools. I didn't know how to be any of those things. So I chose what I chose. We split up. Well, he technically took off with my son. He couldn't take my daughter because she's not his biologically. When I was at work one day, and we went our separate ways. I tried to get him to go to marriage counseling. He wouldn't speak. He did everything he could to make it, you know, I at first I had my daughter and he had my son. I worked nights still. It didn't seem right. It seemed silly that she should be going to a babysitter at night because that wasn't going to change anytime soon. I was a waitress, bartender, lifer person. This is what my career was. And there's no day job, you know what I mean, where you're going to make a couple $100 during the day in New Paltz, New York. And I had that job, but it was night. So I let her go be with him, and he got married again really quickly and made it a little difficult. He used to let me see the kids every week at my own expense. During this time, I got involved in a relationship with someone that was much younger than me and started doing a lot of cocaine with the drinking. And that's it. Everything went to hell. I lost the good job. Um, I lost the good job. I was still seeing my kids once a week, gave up my apartment, followed this idiot to New York City, got a place in Brooklyn, struggled to find a job for a couple years because I didn't have New York City experience. And then, so he was a little abusive. He used to cheat a lot. He was one of those, like, just so you know, we're never going to be like really together, you know, years are going by and he's still right. I love you so much, don't leave me. Every time I would start to leave, he would always, but there was a lot of cheating. And because of what I felt I had done to destroy my marriage and family, I took that shit, all of it. I was like, I deserve it. This is my karma, and I'm gonna take it, and I'm gonna keep taking it. I have no idea why. So there's a lot of drinking, and then the cocaine that went on for like a couple years. It was bad, you know. He like I'd come back from seeing my kids and he would like, I've already called the dealer and he'd shoot it. We would shoot cocaine, and the amounts that he would put in there used to scare the shit out of me. It's one of the only times I ever thought I was actually going to die is from shooting cocaine. My whole body just broke out in a sweat and my heart started beating so fast. And it's probably one of the last times I ever did it because it was that scary. I was always very aware that I didn't want to leave my children with a dead mother. I felt that I was not a good mother. And, but that's a very far cry from like knowing that they could call me if and when they had these questions, that I clearly was never going to have answered for myself.
So you had switched to using a needle.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
What
Well,
made what made you decide
I
to make
used the
that
needle.
switch?
I used the needle with the heroin in my early, in my early 20s. So I was
Okay.
already used to the needle. And I don't know why we decided to shoot the cocaine. I can't remember if the heroin had already started, but somehow, somewhere along the line, because I remember it as like this specific day in my brain where I picked up the phone. I knew something was wrong. I could always tell. He was always cheating on me. And I guess he had been carrying on this relationship for like a couple months, all while I'm like living in his apartment, basically. Well, we call it living, but really it's every time my mom comes over, you have to hide on the roof. So after like being in a relationship like that for years and years, which is basically like someone telling you every single day you're a piece of shit, you're not good enough to even be seen. It takes its toll. Um, but I remember standing on the corner of 14th and 7th and calling my friend who had been like a lifelong heroin addict because I just wanted to die. I did. I wanted to die, but I was like, I can't fucking kill myself. I can't do that to these kids. I have to at least be walking around somewhere, breathing somehow for whatever reason. That was a strong conviction of mine. Um, when I look back now, it's so silly because it's like you're dead anyway. But I understand
Yeah.
why I felt that way because of what I went through as a child with my own mother.
But
But
that's amazing that it kept you alive. That's all that matters at that point, is if it was keeping you alive or not.
so I called my friend and got some heroin, and that was it. Next thing I know, you've got me and the boyfriend. It was like I feel like it probably started in 2003 or four, the heroin addiction. So it's like very short. Like the cocaine kind of just stopped because like the heroin like took over. But there must have been some overlap there that I just can't remember. You know what I mean? Because I don't know why the needles would they wouldn't have been there if we hadn't been doing the other thing first. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I made the call. I got the heroin. I felt better. Managed to hold down a couple of jobs. Like I know I was fooling myself, but I could safely say that even now I look at pictures and I'm like, no one would have ever known. I just doled out the needle shots like medicine a couple times a day in the bathroom at work, and I did what I had to do, and I came up to see my kids once a week. We had nowhere to be. My grandparents' house was like completely condemned at this point. So I'd have to pay for my bus ticket up here and then take my kids out to dinner. I'm very behind on child support still. It's disgusting the amount of money that I made. So this goes on for quite a long time. And I did go to detox a few times. They don't let you stay for rehab if you don't have insurance. I can't tell you how many times I've heard things like scholarship and this and that. Well, it never worked out that way for me. I would be begging them, please don't let me leave. Please let me stay. Because I don't sleep during detox. Like, I don't know how people do, but I could never sleep and it would always do me in. After 5, 6 days of being awake, I could never handle it. I've quit cold turkey and gone back for the reason of sleep alone. Um, and it wasn't like it is now. They just put you back out on the street. They didn't care. They didn't help you get, whatever it was to get to the next level. I definitely feel like I fell through the cracks in like a really big way. But I don't, all I can do with that now is use my voice and hope that it, gets better, which
Did you
from where
try
I,
calling anyone else?
what?
Did you try calling anyone else or just them?
I didn't really, what do you mean?
Never mind. Keep going. Keep going.
So in 2011, I went to a rehab. I went to a rehab and I met someone and I ended up getting pregnant. And I did not clearly was not in the shape to be having a baby. I was homeless. The long-term boyfriend's parents had just moved him to Alaska. So he left. I was homeless. I lived with him, and so I was left homeless on the streets of New York City with nowhere to go and no one to call. And so I went to rehab, found out I was pregnant, hooked up with this guy for a little while who neither one of us had any business even being in a relationship at all. And then and I kept saying to myself, like, I'm not going to, they tell you if you stop using that you're going to lose your baby, have a miscarriage. I was put on the methadone program like 2 weeks before he was born, and I worked like really hard this whole time, like not to develop like an attachment. I'm like, he's gonna have to go for adoption. I clearly can't. I mean, now I've you know what I mean. I'm not had the best luck here. My ex-husband has got Maya Matthew, and then he was born and I saw him, and I would have done anything to be better. So I did what they told me to do. I called my they told me that if I went to an inpatient, a pregnant women's with children inpatient, that he would come there and live with me. But he needed somewhere to be for 30 days first. So I called my stepsister, who agreed to take him for the 30 days. So I'm living in this place with all these women and their newborn babies, and some of them are getting fucked up still, and I'm doing everything right. And it comes to 30 days court, and they're like, Ulster County's like, we think we're going to wait 60 days. And I'm like, okay, okay. So I go back, same shit comes around, 90 days comes around, 90-day court case comes around, and they say, you know what? We've we've decided, now we're going to want 90 days. So, it was 30, 60, and now they're saying 90. At the same time, I was asked, because I was doing so stellar at rehab, right? To take someone to a funeral, you can't go anywhere alone. She already had her newborn baby with her. She asked me if I want to get high. I'm like, okay. At this point, I'm totally defeated. I'm not making excuses for it. I was fucking defeated. I'm living there with all these newborn babies. They clearly were fucking with me, because 30 days is a huge difference between 30 and 90 days. Okay. So it's happening this way, and they find out and they say, we're going to let you stay, but you need to tell us who gave you the drugs. And I would not do that, because I'm staring at this other woman and her little baby who she had in the program, who now I know what she'll be going through, right? They're going to rip her fucking baby right the fuck out of her arms. And I don't know who could do that, but it wasn't me. It wasn't going to be me. And that was it. It was in the wind for years. And it was the last years from 2011 to 2014 were the absolute worst years of my life. I have still a lot of anger towards the judge up here. I was lucky to get blessed with another child in 2014 that no one has ever tried to take away from me, although CPS did drive me crazy for 5 years and never, ever, 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 ever left me alone until 2020 when he was 5. My stepsister does not never allowed me to see my child, and I was homeless. So a year after this, that same judge, I've had her since I got divorced in 2000, by the way. Same judge the whole time, same public defender. The one who gave my son to my sister, tells me that if I don't pay $90 a week child support, I'm going to jail. So I answered an ad on the back of the Village Voice and started escorting. And it took me 6 years of recovery to even begin to work through the shame and misery that whole lifestyle. It was not could be worse, I know it could be worse, but when you're alone out there, you're working for all these like filthy rich people. Sometimes you see them on TV because they're like fucking famous and shit, and you would do anything to just be able to go to rehab, right? To just be able to like have to not be a heroin addict. It was hard. And then I came up here in 2014, back up to New Paltz because my grandpa, the property that was condemned, his neighbor was like a kind of like a long-term friend. I don't want to get into it, but I was up here trying to get clean around 5,067. And there was this guy that I had hung out with a couple times but never slept with. He was a little too nice for me. It was a little too nice for me. Him and his sister, God rest her soul because she's dead now. They picked me up in the middle of the night from where I was, and they just kind of like didn't let me leave, and he just sort of like I like verbal diarrhea, like everything that I had just been through, like the escorting, the Max, the child, all of it. I don't know. And he just loved me anyway. When I tried to leave, I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to go now. He was like, nah, you're not going anywhere. And he just like loved me back to health. And, he had two twin sisters. They both chose suicide in 2020. It has not been an easy recovery by any means.
No, it doesn't sound like it.
It has not been an easy recovery by any means. And it's hard sometimes not to get stuck in those like thoughts of like, are you serious? Like, are you serious? Because you have to realize that I never recovered from my life, like my childhood. So coming into recovery, and I think like most people think like, oh, I'm going to stop doing this drug, right? That I need to have, or I can't get up out of bed. And that was nothing. That was the easiest part of the recovery. The hardest part was, coming to terms with these things that I did, being able to look in the mirror again. Thank God. That was one thing I always used to say to myself when I was like out there using, I'd say, I gotta be able to look at myself in the mirror at the end of the day, and all those rich clients' houses. I was never like, oh, I think I'm gonna steal a bunch of shit. It's just not who I am. It was always gonna be me hurting me. And I'm grateful for that, you know what I mean? Because I can look in the mirror. I'm not saying I'm perfect. Of course I've done silly things, but for the most part, I did everything I could to protect everyone around me and just took the brunt of it. So it was a lot to get through, and it's still a lot to go through, like what is it? So my son's dad, my youngest son's father, had been in an accident in 2011. So he was put on pain pills, and his mother died in 2017, and then that got out of control. So now there's like two of us here in recovery. He's been on Suboxone ever since. All that into raising a child, a healthy, happy child at the same time. I don't know. I've been in long-term group therapy since 2014, 2 to 3 times a week. And now I'm just finishing my KSAC school that I wanted to do since I was in high school. So it's not like some new thing for me. I really want to help, domestic violence and sexual trauma survivors. It's passion for me, and it's something that we don't talk about. You know what I mean? Like nobody really talks about it. People are starting to talk about it, but like it's so much more common than anyone wants to believe, and
Yeah.
it's a lot. So, I just stay positive and do the best I can. I did get to start speaking to my dad again, because his wife sort of kept us, I guess, apart really for like years and years and years and years. Um, it's such a, it's like a really messed up, it's like a Jerry Springer. Her daughter accused my dad of inappropriate touching. I don't know. I was not there. I only can speak for myself, and that never happened to me. And, it's hard for me to connect with my family. I have a large extended family, but I've been absent from them so long. I have an awkwardness about me. I don't feel like I fit in like anywhere. So I just had to, I made my own. I have a really tiny family. It's like me, Jesse, and my son Blaze. My older kids still don't speak to me at all. And that is hard, you know but it is a repercussion of my actions that I got to live with.
And give it time, like they say, time heals all wounds. Things come
Hmm.
around. If you keep just doing the right thing, things will come around.
Yeah, that's what they say. But I do take medication. Not the kind that most people would think, but I appreciate that you know, one thing that we're learning, everyone, right, is that, recovery is not one size fits all. It's different for everybody. Our brains get permanently rewired, damaged, we could say, right?
Hmm.
Damaged my own brain. And sometimes we need help with that. Sometimes it has to be forever, and not everyone is the same. So what works for one may not work for another. When I would come back from those methadone when I was pregnant with Max, every day I would barf the methadone in the driveway. I used Suboxone to get sober. You give me 2 milligrams of Suboxone, and I look like I just shot up 15 bags. You know what I mean? Like everyone is different. I think that pain is a bitch, and I do believe that people should have access to the things that they need. It's not always about want. Sometimes it is about need. And I don't know if you've taken a look around, but a lot of lives are lost still every day with suicide and drug overdose, and it's really sad. So I appreciate what you're doing, um, because unless the stories are heard, nothing ever changes.
Exactly. People need to hear our stories.
Mhm.
That's the name of a book. I wrote a book that's going to be out in a month or two, and the name of it is Addicts Anonymous: Our Stories. Because the second half of the book is just like the AA book, where it's people's it's a collection of stories.
Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't do AA, but I will tell you, I did eventually stop drinking. I just didn't align with, like, I figured when this started, I was like, okay, I just don't want to be like addicted to heroin anymore. That's it for me. I'll like party for life, right? I'm gonna like die with like tequila in my hand. No, it just sort of fell away, like it just, now it's, cigarettes are definitely a problem, but it's been a few years. I can't remember my last drunk. That way doesn't work for me. Keeping track, paying too much attention. I'm one of those people who just has to like not think about it and do
Yeah,
it.
me too.
So I did. It has been a few years since I had a drink. And I'm proud of that because that was never, you know what I mean? Like I
Oh
really
yeah,
just
it's never
never,
a possibility.
it wasn't even like a desire. Like I didn't, like it was well past, I don't know. I just figured I'd always would here and there have a couple glasses of wine or whatever. But then after so much recovering goes by, and then being in these groups and hearing these stories, and then learning the science, and then the liver thing, I contracted hep C from using, and when my liver started to go, it was eye opening. I don't think anyone realizes what happens when that happens. And I was lucky to get the treatment, but because of that, I will never drink again because I felt like I was dying, and I would never want to, you know, disrespect just the fact that I was even able to get the treatment because they didn't want to give it to me before they made me wait till I was like sick. God love that Medicaid.
Oh, that's terrible.
I apologize. I was really hoping I'd be able to get through it without the tears. Um,
No, you did a great job. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
thank
Let me
you.
ask you one last question.
Hmm.
Do you have advice for people watching and listening?
The best thing I can say is that the power is inside of you. It's in you. It's not in any person. It's not even really like in any book, although reading the books helps. Mindfulness, prayer, whatever it is that it helped me to learn about myself, to learn about the why perhaps I had, some of these statistics, like people that are abandoned by their parents, a lot of times tend to abandon children because they don't know another way. So the more I educated myself about my own self, the healthier and the more clear things became. And then the shame and all of that started to drift away. Once the shame was able to start drifting away, and I was able to realize that I am a good person and I'm worthy of love and all of that thing. And it's not, but it's also not about blame. You take accountability for it. And as hard as it is, you do have to let go of the anger. Like I had mentioned with the judge, that is a really hard thing for me because she's an official capacity. But I do realize it's not about her. Letting go of those pains, it's all for you. The more work you do on you, on only you, that's how you get there. That my last 2 years of recovery, and it's been since 2014, have been like warp speed. And that's all I did. I started reading more and paying more attention to what I could do to help myself. And the groups, the therapy. The therapy is key because I have not met an addict yet who does not have some sort of trauma or underlying anxiety, mental illness issue. And there is no shame in that. There is no shame in it at all. That is the key.
Thank you for that. So, do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, thank you so much. I'm just really grateful. As hard as it is, sometimes being alive every day when so many people, and I know I'm not the only one losing people by the droves over here, are not. It's always a gift. So just thank you so much for having me.
No, it was a pleasure. It really was. So sit tight for me. And for everybody watching and listening, if you like what you heard and saw, go below and give us a like. Also, subscribe to see when we upload new videos. You could also check us out on Twitter, Reddit, Tumblr, Facebook, TikTok, pretty much every social media platform, and also Instagram. Forgot to mention that one. You can also check out our website, which is www.addicts-anonymous.com. There you will find plenty of free literature as well as some resources. And that's all we have for today. So once again, I hope you enjoyed. And until next time.